The champagne glass was still in my hand when my husband stood up in front of 200 of our closest clients and told everyone the company was now his and only his. Good day, listeners. It's Martha Hale here, and I'm 44 years old. Before I continue, like and subscribe and leave your comment, because what I'm about to tell you, I promise, you have never heard anything like it. 20 years. That's how long I spent building Hale & Doyle Design Group with my husband, Richard Doyle. I was the Hale. I was the name people actually called when they wanted a show home that made grown men cry, when they wanted a boutique hotel lobby that got written up in 3 magazines before the paint even dried. Richard handled the money, or so I thought. Turns out Richard handled a lot more than the money. It was our 20th anniversary gala, 200 guests, our biggest clients, our biggest investors, journalists from 2 design magazines. I was wearing a dress I'd designed myself, standing on a stage I'd built with my bare hands, literally because I used to swing a hammer right alongside the contractors in the early years. Richard took the microphone to give a toast. I thought it would be about us, about 20 years of marriage, 20 years of building something from nothing. Instead, he smiled at the crowd, raised his glass, and said, "Tonight I have 2 announcements. The first is that, as of this morning, I am the sole owner of Hale & Doyle. The second is that I'd like you all to meet my fiancée." And out walked Vanessa, my assistant, my protégé. The girl I mentored for 6 years, taught everything I knew, invited into my home for Thanksgiving dinner. 4 years running, the room went dead silent. 200 people stared at me, waiting to see what I would do. I remember a particular sound, or maybe the absence of one. The string quartet we'd hired had stopped mid-note. The cellist's bow just hovering there, frozen. Someone dropped a fork. I heard it hit the floor like it happened in slow motion. "Richard?" I said, and my own voice sounded strange to me, thin and far away. "What did you just say?" He smiled at me the way you'd smile at an employee who'd asked a question you found slightly tedious. "I said what I said, Martha. The paperwork's been filed. It's done. I didn't want you to hear it from a lawyer's letter, so I thought I'd tell you here with everyone we love around us. Everyone we love." I actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, because the cruelty of that phrase delivered in that room, in that moment, was almost impressive in its precision. "You're doing this in front of 200 people because you knew I wouldn't make a scene." "I'm doing this in front of 200 people," he said, lowering his voice just slightly, just for me, "because I knew you'd need witnesses to believe it actually happened. You always did need proof of everything, Martha. Here's your proof." I stood there in my own dress, on my own stage in front of my own guests, and I understood in that exact second that I had already lost. It just hadn't been announced to me first. I found out later how he did it. 8 months earlier, Richard had asked me to sign a restructuring document for tax purposes. I trusted him. I signed without reading every page because I trusted the man I'd been married to for 2 decades. That document quietly transferred my 49% into a holding company he fully controlled. It was legal. It was calculated. It was cruel in a way that only someone who has studied you for 20 years can be cruel by Monday morning. My badge didn't work on the office door. My name was already being scraped off the building signage. I watched a man on a lift doing it through the lobby window, and I stood on the sidewalk in my coat and just watched, like I was watching someone else's life get erased. A security guard I'd hired myself, a kind older man named Otis, who used to save me a coffee from the machine downstairs every single morning, wouldn't quite meet my eyes when he told me, "I'm real sorry, Miss Hale. I got instructions. I can't let you up." "It's all right, Otis," I told him, and I meant it, because none of this was his fault, and I refused to become the kind of woman who took her rage out on people who had none of the power in the situation. My bank accounts, the joint ones, were frozen pending review. My car, technically leased under the company, gone. My assistant gone because she was now wearing my old engagement ring's replacement on her finger. Even my email, my actual work email that I'd used for 2 decades to build relationships with clients I genuinely loved, redirected automatically to an assistant, Vanessa, of course, within 48 hours. Clients I had personally guided through the best design decisions of their lives started receiving polite notes informing them their project lead has changed, and not one of them heard it from me first because I no longer had any way to tell them. I want you to understand something about me before I keep going. I did not cry on that sidewalk. I wanted to, God, I wanted to, but something in me, some stubborn, mean, unbreakable little pilot light, just would not go out. I stood there, and I thought, okay, Richard, you want to erase 20 years? Watch me build 20 more without you, and watch you choke on it. I had $11,000 in a personal savings account he didn't know about, one that I'd opened years earlier just in case, back when a small, suspicious voice in me used to whisper that something wasn't right. I never listened to that voice enough. This time, I did. I packed one suitcase, everything else. The house, the car, the friends who suddenly stopped texting me back because they were staying neutral, I left behind. I bought a one-way plane ticket to New York City, a place I had visited exactly twice in my life, and I did not tell a single soul in my old life that I was leaving. The plane landed at 11 at night. I remember standing outside LaGuardia with my one suitcase, the cold air hitting my face, the skyline glittering like it didn't care one bit about my problems, and thinking, this city is going to eat me alive or it's going to make me. There's no in-between in a place like this. For the first month, it nearly ate me alive. I took a room in a 5th-floor walk-up that smelled like someone else's cooking, always, no matter the hour. I applied to design firms with a resume that said, founder and creative director, Hale Design Group, 20 years, and I watched hiring managers' eyes flick up at me like they were doing math. Overqualified. Underemployed. Damaged goods, probably. They were thinking, though nobody ever said it out loud. Nobody wants to hire the founder. They want to hire someone who will listen to them. One interview I remember specifically because it's the one that almost broke me. A boutique firm downtown. Small team. Exactly the kind of place I thought I could quietly slot into and rebuild myself in peace. The creative director, a woman maybe 32, flipped through my portfolio, looked up at me and said, not unkindly, honestly, I'm a little intimidated to hire you. Won't you just want to run the place in 6 months? I don't want to run anything, I told her. I want a paycheck and a chair to sit in. She didn't believe me. Nobody believed me. I left that interview, sat down on a bench 2 blocks away, and for the first time since the sidewalk, I let myself cry, not for long. Maybe 4 minutes. I gave myself exactly 4 minutes, and then I wiped my face, bought a subway pass with money I couldn't really spare, and went to look at a listing for a 5th-floor walk-up I could barely afford because sitting on that bench feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to pay for it. I took freelance jobs nobody wanted, staging a foreclosed condo for a real estate agent who paid me $200 and made me carry the furniture myself. Redesigning a dentist's waiting room for free because I needed something, anything, for a portfolio that didn't have Richard's name attached to it. I painted a stranger's nursery for $150 cash and a decent Yelp review. Ate the same $11 bowl of noodles from the place on the corner so many nights that the owner started making it before I even sat down and eventually started calling me boss, which some nights was the only thing that made me smile. There was a night, maybe 6 weeks in, when I genuinely considered calling Richard. Not out of love, out of exhaustion. I actually had my phone in my hand, his contact still saved under Rich from some version of me that no longer existed, and I sat on the edge of my mattress on the floor. I hadn't afforded a bed frame yet, and I stared at that name for a long, long time. I didn't call, I deleted the contact instead, typed his number from memory into a note just in case I ever needed it for legal reasons, and went back to sketching. That was the night, if I'm honest with you listeners, that I actually started rebuilding. Not the night I landed in New York. That night, on the floor, with a dead phone battery and an empty stomach, and absolutely nothing left to lose, but every single night after that, no matter how tired I was, I sketched. I kept a notebook. Floor plans, color studies, ideas nobody had asked for and nobody was paying for. Because the one thing Richard could never take from me, the one thing that document never touched, was what was in my head. 4 months in, I got a call that changed everything. A property management company was in a full-blown crisis. A luxury penthouse renovation, top floor of a building on the Upper East Side, was supposed to be photographed for a major real estate launch in 6 days. The designer they'd hired had walked off the job, some dispute about payment, leaving the unit half-finished, contractors standing around confused, and a launch event already invited on the calendar with 100 VIP guests. The property manager was a woman named Carla who had seen one of my free staging jobs and, out of pure desperation, called me at 10 at night. "I need someone who can walk into chaos and make it look like it was always the plan," she said. "Can you do that?" "I built a company out of chaos for 20 years, I told her. "Try me?" I walked into that penthouse the next morning, and it was a disaster. Half-installed lighting, furniture in the wrong rooms, a kitchen backsplash that clashed violently with everything around it, contractors standing there with their arms crossed, waiting to be told what to do by someone they didn't believe could actually fix it. The lead contractor, a broad-shouldered man named Sal, who'd clearly seen designers come and go on this exact job already, looked me up and down and said, "No offense, but the last one had 15 years experience and a team of 6 behind her. What exactly are you bringing to this?" 20 years of experience, 1 notebook, and 6 days, I said. "You can stand there with your arms crossed doubting me, or you can start pulling out that backsplash while I finalize the palette. Either way, in 6 days, this unit is getting photographed. I'd rather it be photographed looking finished than looking like an argument." He didn't move for a second. Then he almost smiled and picked up a crowbar. I didn't waste another second on being polite after that. I pointed at the backsplash. "That comes out today." I pointed at a crew leader. "You, lighting first, then flooring." I pulled out my notebook, flipped to a page I'd sketched 2 nights earlier for absolutely no reason except that I liked the idea, and said, "We're doing this palette instead, trust me." 6 days later, that penthouse was featured in the launch, and it was the most talked about unit in the building. The man who owned the building was there that night. Tall silver at the temples, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to raise its voice in a room because the room already knows who he is. His name was Julian Cross, and by that point in his life, he had built and sold 3 companies, and everyone in that industry either wanted to work for him or was terrified of becoming his competitor. He found me in the corner of the party, where I was fixing a crooked lampshade because old habits die hard, and he said, "You're the one who saved this." "I'm the one who fixed someone else's mess in 6 days with a crew that didn't believe in me until day 4, I said. "There's a difference." He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "No, there isn't. That's exactly what saving something looks like." We talked for almost an hour that night. Not about romance, listeners. Let me be clear about that from the start, because I know where some of your minds are going. Julian Cross was not my knight in shining armor. He never once tried to rescue me. What he did was worse for my excuses and better for my life. He simply refused to let me underestimate myself. "What happened to you?" he asked at one point, studying me. A designer with your instincts doesn't just appear at 44 with a 5-day-old business card. So I told him, all of it, the gala, the document, the sidewalk. I expected pity. I've gotten enough of that look from people to recognize it instantly. He didn't give it to me. "So he took your company," Julian said slowly, "and you built something better in 6 days with borrowed tools and a crew that hated you on site. When you say it like that, it sounds impressive. It is impressive. It's also a waste. You should be running your own firm, not saving other people's disasters for $200 a job." "I don't have the capital for my own firm." "I didn't ask if you had the capital," he said. "I asked what you were waiting for." That was Julian. He never once handed me anything. What he did was worse and better. He opened 3 doors and made me walk through every single one of them myself. He introduced me to a small group of investors, but he told them plainly, "I'm not vouching for her because I like her. I'm vouching for her because I watched her fix in 6 days what a professional couldn't fix in 6 weeks. Talk to her yourselves." I pitched those investors like my life depended on it because at that point it did. I got a modest initial investment, enough for 1 small studio space, 3 employees, and a name. I named it Hale Design House, my name, only my name this time. No partner, no one to sign anything away from me ever again. The first year was brutal. Long nights, brutal client demands, a warehouse fire that destroyed an entire furniture shipment 2 weeks before a major reveal, which I solved by staying awake for 36 hours straight, redesigning the entire concept from scratch with whatever I could source overnight. My 3 employees thought I'd completely lost my mind. I hadn't. I just learned the hard way that panic is a luxury I could no longer afford. There was one client, early on, a real estate developer named Preston Kilbride, who nearly sank us before we'd even started. He'd hired me specifically because I was cheap and desperate, his words repeated back to me later by his own site manager. Halfway through a boutique hotel lobby project, he tried to renegotiate our contract down by 40%. Banking on the fact that a brand new firm with 3 employees couldn't afford to walk away from a signed job. I walked away from the job. "You can't do that," he told me, genuinely stunned, standing in his half-finished lobby. "I'll tell every developer in this city not to touch you." "Mr. Kilbride," I said, "I spent 20 years building a company with a man who thought contracts were suggestions. I promised myself I would never work for anyone who felt entitled to steal from me again. Good luck finding someone else who can finish this on your timeline." He called back 4 days later, contract intact, full price. Word travels fast in this industry, and apparently so does respect, once you actually demand it. Julian and I stayed close through all of it. Dinner once a month, sometimes more, mostly just to argue about design philosophy and business strategy over a bottle of wine he always insisted on choosing, which, if you've never had a friendship like that, listeners, I highly recommend it. He never once let me get comfortable. Every time I hit a milestone, he'd ask, "What's the next one?" before I even finish celebrating the last.
"You're relentless,"
I told him once, halfway through year 2, after he'd pushed me to pitch for a project I thought was completely out of our league. "I'm not relentless," he said. "I just refuse to watch someone with your talent play small because one man made you doubt yourself. That's not relentlessness, Martha. That's just paying attention. Why do you even care this much? You don't owe me anything." He considered that for a moment, swirling his wine, and said, "I've spent 30 years around people who inherited their confidence or bought it. You earned yours back from absolute zero in front of me in real time. That's rarer than you think. I'd be a fool not to invest in it." I never forgot that conversation. Not once, not through everything that came after. By year 2, we had a waiting list of clients, 3 months deep. By year 3, we were being written up in the same design magazines that used to run glossy features on Hale and Doyle, except this time, the byline photos were mine and mine alone. No Richard standing beside me with his hand on the small of my back like he owned the credit for my eye. 3 years after that sidewalk in front of my old office, I was standing in a new one, the flagship showroom for Hale Design House, in a beautifully restored building I had personally chosen and negotiated for, about to host the grand opening gala. Investors, press, the kind of night that, 3 years earlier, standing on a 5th-floor walk-up eating $11 noodles, I would have thought was a fantasy. I should have known that the moment things were going too well, the past was going to come crawling back to ruin it. 2 days before the grand opening, I got a call from Carla, the property manager who'd first hired me all those years ago and who was now, happily, one of my closest friends in the city. "Martha," she said, her voice tight, "I think you need to sit down. What happened?" "Someone's been calling my old contacts, asking questions about you, about your business practices, about whether you took client information when you left your old firm." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Who?" "A woman named Vanessa Doyle says she's speaking on behalf of Doyle Design Group." There it was, my old assistant now wearing my old name, coming for me after 3 years of silence, right as I was about to have the biggest night of my new life. "There's more," Carla said, hesitating. "I got sent a link this morning. A blog post going around some of the industry forums. It's not signed, but it reads exactly like her voice. It basically says you built your so-called empire on stolen client relationships and a wealthy older man's money, and that anyone investing in your gala should ask themselves what they're really funding." I closed my eyes and pressed 2 fingers against my temple, willing myself not to shake. "Send it to me." I read it twice, sitting perfectly still at my desk after everyone else had gone home for the evening. It was clever, I'll give Vanessa that much. Clever in the way only someone who studied you closely for years could be clever. It didn't call me a thief outright. It just asked questions. It didn't call me a gold digger outright. It just wondered, in that same fake concerned tone she'd used on me for 6 years, whether investors should know the full picture before Thursday night. I picked up the phone and called Julian immediately. He picked up on the second ring, even though it was almost 10 at night. "Read it to me," he said once I'd explained, and I could hear him settling into a chair on the other end, giving me his full attention the way he always did, no matter the hour. I read him the post, word for word. He was quiet for a moment when I finished. "They wouldn't do this unless they were desperate," he finally said. "People who are winning don't bother attacking someone 2 days before her biggest night. They ignore her. This isn't strength, Martha. This is panic wearing a nice dress. It doesn't feel like panic. It feels like it could ruin everything I've built. It will if you let it rattle you into silence. It won't if you already know something they don't." A pause. "Martha, you did not spend 3 years building this out of nothing so that 2 people who couldn't build anything on their own could take it from you a second time. Do you understand me?" "I understand." "Then here's what we're going to do. You're going to find out exactly what they're planning and exactly why they're this scared. Desperate people leave trails. And then you're going to let them walk right into their own trap in front of everyone who matters. And if I can't find anything in 2 days, you will," he said simply. "You always do. You just don't trust yourself yet to remember that." I spent the next 36 hours doing what I do best, figuring out exactly what a mess actually was before I touched a single piece of it. I still had contacts from my old life, people who quietly still liked me, who had watched what Richard did to me and never fully forgave him for it, even while cashing his paychecks. One of them, a bookkeeper named Frank, who had worked under Richard for 11 years, called me back within an hour of my message, his voice hushed like he was standing in a stairwell somewhere so no one could overhear. "I never told anyone this," Frank said, his voice low, like even 3 years later he was scared of Richard hearing him. "But the reason Richard pushed you out so fast, so cleanly, wasn't really about control of the design. It was about the money." "What money?" "For the last 2 years of your marriage, Richard was skimming from client renovation budgets, charging clients for materials that were never purchased, pocketing the difference through a shell vendor he set up under a slightly misspelled version of his own middle name, small enough that nobody double-checking an invoice would ever catch it. I have the invoices. I kept copies, Martha, because I always had a feeling this day might come, and I wasn't about to go down with him if it ever surfaced. Why are they doing this now, Frank? Attacking me 2 days before my opening." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Because Doyle Design Group is bleeding money, Martha. 2 major clients pulled out last quarter after a renovation went catastrophically over budget, and Richard's been scrambling to land new investors ever since. I think he saw your gala, saw the guest list, and panicked. If he can knock you down publicly, discredit you before serious money starts flowing your way, maybe some of it flows toward him instead. This isn't really about you at all. It never really was. It's about him needing something and deciding, again, that taking it from you was easier than earning it himself." I sat there on my studio floor at midnight, staring at a stack of forwarded PDF invoices on my laptop screen, and I understood finally completely why Richard had rushed that restructuring document through 8 months before the gala. It wasn't just about controlling the company. It was about controlling me specifically before I could ever look too closely at the books. "Frank," I said, "would you be willing to say all of this on the record?" There was a long pause. "For you?" "Yes." He never once said thank you to me in 11 years. You always did. 2 days later, I walked into my own grand opening gala knowing exactly what was coming. And for the first time in this entire story, listeners, I was the one holding all the cards. The showroom looked exactly the way I dreamed it would look on that 5th floor walk-up 3 years earlier. Back when a room like this felt like pure fantasy, warm brass lighting. My own furniture line displayed against walls. I'd chosen the paint for myself, mixed twice until the color was exactly right. A quartet playing near the entrance, a small, deliberate echo of the one that had gone silent at my old anniversary gala, except this time, nothing was going to stop the music. I stood in the doorway for one full breath before stepping inside, just to feel it. 3 years, one suitcase, $11,000, and now this. The showroom filled quickly. Investors in tailored suits, press with cameras, city council members who'd come to cut a ribbon, design journalists I recognized from magazines that used to feature Hale and Doyle, and Julian standing quietly near the back, exactly where he always stood, letting me have the room. I hadn't told Julian everything on purpose. I wanted him to trust that I could handle this myself, and I wanted honestly to prove it to myself too. So when he found me backstage 20 minutes before doors opened, straightening my dress in a mirror propped against a crate of table linens, and asked, "Are you ready?" I just smiled. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said. "Tonight, they just don't know it yet. You don't have to do this alone." "I know," I said, "but I need to. Just be in the room, Julian. That's all I need from you tonight." He nodded once like a man who understood exactly what that meant and walked out to take his usual spot near the back, exactly where he always stood, letting me have the room. Richard and Vanessa arrived 40 minutes into the event, uninvited, dressed like they belonged there, smiling like sharks. Richard walked straight up to a cluster of journalists before he even acknowledged me. "I actually used to be her business partner," he announced, loudly enough for the room to shift its attention. Some people might be curious what really happened at our old firm. Certain client relationships, certain files, that walked out the door with her, Vanessa chimed in, right on cue, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's honestly sad. Martha was brilliant, but brilliance doesn't excuse taking what isn't yours. We just want the truth out there before people invest their trust and their money in her." A journalist immediately turned toward me, pen ready. "Ms. Hale, is there any truth to these allegations?" The old me, the sidewalk me, might have frozen. The new me smiled. "I think that's a wonderful question," I said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Let's actually talk about the truth, all of it, right now, with everyone here." I walked to the small stage at the center of the showroom, the one meant for a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and I picked up the microphone instead. 3 years ago at my 20th anniversary gala, my husband, Richard Doyle, stood on a stage very much like this one and announced, in front of 200 guests, that he had made himself sole owner of the company I built with my own 2 hands. He did this using a restructuring document I signed in good faith, trusting a man I'd been married to for 20 years. That same night, he introduced his new fiancée, my former assistant, standing right there in the blue dress. The room had gone completely silent. Cameras were rolling now. Every single one aimed at me. For 3 years, I said nothing about how it happened. I rebuilt from a suitcase and $11,000. I earned every single thing in this room tonight. But since Mr. Doyle wants to talk about what walked out the door with me, let's actually discuss what's been walking out the door of Doyle Design Group for the last several years. I nodded toward the screen behind me, which the event technician, briefed only an hour earlier, brought to life. "These are invoices," I said, "for renovation materials billed to 11 different clients of Doyle Design Group, marble countertops, custom lighting fixtures, imported hardwood, all billed and paid for, except they were never purchased. The money went instead to a shell vendor registered under a name you'll recognize if you look closely, Richard Vance Doyle." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard's face had gone the color of chalk. "This is a fabrication," he said, his voice cracking slightly despite himself. "This is slander, and I will sue you into the ground." "You're welcome to try," I said calmly. "Every document up on that screen came directly from your own longtime bookkeeper, who is prepared to testify under oath and who has been keeping meticulous dated records for years, specifically because he suspected this day might come." Vanessa found her voice sharp and brittle. "This is absurd. You're just bitter, Martha. You've always been bitter that Richard chose me." I actually laughed at that, a genuine laugh, and it seemed to unsettle her more than any accusation could have. Vanessa, I want you to hear this clearly because I don't think you ever have. I am not bitter that Richard chose you. I feel sorry for you. You spent 6 years learning everything I know, and instead of using any of it to build something of your own, you decided it was easier to help a man cook his books and call it love. That's not romance. That's just a smaller version of what he did to me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. I turned back toward the journalists, my voice steady. I'd also encourage anyone here tonight who has hired Doyle Design Group in the last 3 years to have their renovation invoices independently audited. I have a feeling you're not going to like what you find. Vanessa grabbed Richard's arm, whispering something urgent, her composure completely gone. A city council member who had been standing near the front, one who I later learned had personally referred 2 clients to Doyle Design Group, quietly stepped away and was already on his phone. That's when Julian finally stepped forward from the back of the room, not to save me. I want to be very clear, listeners. I did not need saving. I had already delivered the blow myself, but to add the final piece of weight the room needed. I want to add something briefly, Julian said, and every head in the room turned, because when Julian Cross speaks at an event, people listen. 3 years ago, I watched this woman walk into a disaster with nothing but a notebook and instincts, and fix in 6 days what a paid professional had failed to fix in 6 weeks. I have watched her build this company from a single small studio into what stands in this room tonight, brick by brick, honestly, transparently, with every investor dollar accounted for and every client relationship earned. I don't invest my name in people lightly. I invested it in her because she deserves it. I would suggest anyone considering doing business with Mr. Doyle ask themselves why he felt the need to attack an honest woman's grand opening instead of simply competing on merit. The room turned on Richard and Vanessa almost instantly. A journalist was already typing furiously. 2 investors who Richard had apparently been courting quietly slipped toward the exit, faces tight with the specific discomfort of people who just realized they'd nearly attached their names to a scandal. Within an hour, the story was already spreading online. Not the story Richard wanted told, but the true one. Richard grabbed Vanessa's wrist and pulled her toward the door, but not before he turned back to me one last time, his face twisted with a mixture of rage and something that almost looked like fear. "You destroyed me," he said, in front of everyone. I looked at him. This man I had once loved for 20 years, this man who erased my name off a building while I watched from the sidewalk, and I felt absolutely nothing. Not triumph, not rage, just quiet, complete certainty. "No, Richard," I said, "you destroyed yourself 3 years ago when you decided that stealing was easier than earning. Tonight, people simply found out. He and Vanessa left." The gala continued. My grand opening, the one they had come to burn to the ground, became instead the single most talked about launch in the city's design press that entire season. Within a month, Doyle Design Group had lost 8 of its remaining major clients. The district attorney's office opened a formal fraud investigation based on the documents Frank provided, along with several clients who'd audited their invoices and found exactly what I predicted they would. Richard's business license was suspended pending investigation. Vanessa, who it turned out had also signed off on several of those fraudulent invoices as office manager, found herself named as a person of interest right alongside him. The industry that once whispered about poor Martha left with nothing was now whispering an entirely different story about the woman who rebuilt an empire from a suitcase and then calmly dismantled the people who tried to destroy it a second time, using nothing but the truth and excellent documentation. Carla called me the morning after the gala, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. "Martha, you're everywhere. It's not even design press anymore. It's actual news. Someone at the paper called it the takedown of the year." "I didn't do it for headlines," I told her. "I know, that's exactly why it worked. Frank, the bookkeeper, sent me a short email a week later, just one line, 11 years of silence, and it only took you 5 minutes to make it worth it. Thank you for finally giving me a reason to speak." I printed that email out and kept it in the top drawer of my desk, and I still have it there today. Vanessa tried once to salvage her own reputation by giving an interview claiming she'd been manipulated by Richard the entire time, that she hadn't known about the fraudulent invoices. Nobody believed her, mostly because her own signature was on 6 of them. The interview backfired so badly that the outlet that ran it issued a correction 2 days later. 6 months after the gala, I was standing in my studio late on a Friday evening, reviewing sketches for a new hotel project, when my assistant buzzed to tell me I had a visitor who didn't have an appointment. It was Richard alone, thinner than I remembered, wearing a suit that no longer fit him quite right, standing in my lobby looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 6 months. "Martha," he said when I came out, "please, just 5 minutes." I could have refused. Part of me wanted to. But I've never been a woman who runs from things, so I let him have his 5 minutes, standing right there in the lobby in full view of my staff. "I lost everything," he said. "The investigation, the lawsuits from clients, the legal fees. Vanessa left 2 months ago, took what was left of the joint accounts we'd opened. I have nothing, Martha. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I'm asking, is there any chance at all that we could—" "Stop," I said, and my voice was calm, so calm it surprised even me. "I want to be very clear with you, Richard, so there's no confusion later. I am not angry with you anymore. I want you to understand that anger would mean you still take up space in my life, and you don't. Martha, you made a choice 3 years ago on a stage in front of 200 people. You made another choice 6 months ago when you decided the way to handle my success was to try to burn it down instead of building your own. Those were your choices, and now these are your consequences. I didn't do this to you, you did this to yourself twice, and I simply refuse to be your victim a third time. So that's it? After 20 years, that's it? That's it," I said. "I hope you land on your feet somewhere, genuinely, because I don't wish you harm. But I also don't owe you anything. Not forgiveness on demand. Not a second chance. Not 5 more minutes of my evening. I have a hotel opening in 11 weeks and a life I built entirely without you, and I intend to keep building it." He stood there a moment longer, like he was waiting for me to change my mind the way I used to change my mind for him for 20 straight years. I didn't. He finally nodded quietly and walked toward the door. Just before he reached it, he turned back one last time. "For what it's worth," he said, "you built something real. I hope you know that. I hope you knew it even before all of this." "I did," I said. "I always did, Richard. You were just the only one who couldn't see it." I turned, walked back into my studio, and asked my assistant to please show Mr. Doyle out. That was the last time I ever saw him. I heard secondhand, through Frank, that he eventually settled the fraud charges with a plea deal, paid restitution to the clients he defrauded, and now works as a project manager for a small contracting outfit 2 states away, under close supervision from a firm that reportedly does not know his full history. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the quiet, settled feeling of a door that had been closed for a long time finally being confirmed shut for good. Vanessa, last I heard, moved back to her hometown. I don't know what she's doing now, and for the first time in this entire story, I can honestly tell you, I don't care to know. My studio has 41 employees now. We're opening our 2nd location this spring, in a building I negotiated for myself with a name over the door that no one will ever be able to take off without my signature on it. Julian and I are still close, still arguing about design philosophy over dinner once a month, still exactly the kind of friendship that saved my life without ever once needing to be anything more than that. Maybe someday it becomes something more, maybe it never does. Either way, I stopped needing anyone to complete my story a long time ago on a sidewalk, with 1 suitcase and $11,000, and I think that's exactly why it turned out the way it did. I think about that sidewalk sometimes. The version of me standing there, watching my own name get scraped off a building, certain her life was over. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I'd tell her that the man taking her name off that building could never once take away the thing that actually built it. I'd tell her that $11,000 and 1 suitcase is not the end of a story, it's the opening line of a much better one. And I'd tell her, most of all, that 3 years from that exact moment, she wouldn't just survive what he did to her. She'd stand on a stage of her own, in a building of her own, and watch every single person who ever doubted her learn, all at once, exactly who she really was. It wasn't over that day on the sidewalk. It was only the beginning of the only story that was ever really mine. Have you ever found the strength to completely cut out toxic people from your life and watch karma do its job? Or did you feel the need to prove something to them? Comment below. I read all your stories.